Contrapoints is a lefty YouTuber. She has quite a following. She makes some pretty amazing content. I don't watch her stuff religiously, but I've watched a decent amount of her stuff, and every time, I'm taken aback by how not only well produced it is, but just well thought out. She's very thorough with her viewpoints and breaking down stuff, and I can't recommend highly enough. She did a video on Jordan Peterson, for example, and just totally deconstructed everything about him and his ideology in a way that was astonishing, to be honest. Really, really into the weeds. So she's super intellectual. She's part of what many call BreadTube. I'm not sure how much I fully embrace that label, and I'm also not sure if people would consider me necessarily a part of it. But anyway, she went on a little bit of a tweet storm yesterday that I think is really important and really amazing. So let me show you the first one here. She says, 3 years and 4 million views after upload. Today, YouTube has age-restricted my video incels. Age restriction significantly reduces a video's visibility, requiring viewers to be logged in and over 18 to watch, and suppressing it in the recommendation algorithm. So I'll just give you some more here. She continues and says, YouTube's community guidelines are supposed to make it clear to creators what content is allowed on the platform, but the guidelines are enforced very arbitrarily, actually worse than arbitrarily. Video restriction removal is often triggered by an easily abused flagging system. That's true, and that's something I've known but haven't talked about on the show yet. Randomly enforced restrictions are more restrictive than ones that are consistently enforced. If enforcement is consistent, you know what the rules are and you can work around them, but arbitrary enforcement forces you into superstitious, neurotic self-censorship. You don't know what exactly you can get away with, so you start bleeping and blurring and omitting anything that could possibly be evocative of sex, drugs, violence, profanity, hate speech, or bullying. This is bad for art. Suppose you're a history YouTuber. Can you show images of Nazi Germany for educational purposes? Images often shown in school to people under 18? According to the community guidelines, yes, but in practice, such videos are often restricted or removed for hate speech. We've seen this a number of times. Suppose you're a feminist or sex educator. Can you say the words pornography, rape, clitoris? YouTube is often the only chance to educate teenagers about these topics before Pornhub does. But on YouTube, this kind of content is very often age restricted. Because most of my funding comes from Patreon, I'm in the fortunate position of not being financially relevant on the erratic whims of this broken system, so I can afford to take risks. But most creators aren't so lucky. Then she says, free speech should be reclaimed as an essential leftist issue. We should not surrender the most fundamental civil right to Google LLC in the name of deplatforming rightists and curtailing harassment. It's not worth the cost. Hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. And what you're seeing now is a lot of people on the left really are starting to have that enlightenment moment. Because the way this was originally pitched to us, it was in a package that a lot of people found attractive. And the package was, oh my God, Alex Jones is so bad. Look at the stuff he's doing. We can't possibly tolerate him on the platform. Wouldn't it be great if we just totally banned him and deplatformed him and censored him and effectively gave him the internet death penalty? And a lot of people on the left were like, I fucking hate that guy. That guy's the worst. That guy's an abuser. That guy's an harasser. He's got to go. He's got to go. And so what people didn't realize is you just agreed to a principle that's going to destroy you and your own. People didn't realize it, but that's what's happening. Because this is the way censorship always works, is you start with people who are so extreme and so insane that there's going to be a lot of people who are sympathetic. A lot of reasonable people are going to say, I kind of get it. But then, again, what happens is now you just open the door. And that is the slipperiest slippery slope of all time. And now there's no end to it. And so we've seen it time and time again. For every person who's on the right or some white supremacist or something who gets banned, there's another person on the left. High-profile examples recently is that there were a lot of Antifa accounts, very large Antifa accounts on Twitter that were banned. We saw this with Reddit. The Donald Reddit was pulled down, but then so was the Chapo Trap House one. And so they're never going to stop. And people on the left who have seen these things in the past have been screaming at the top of their lungs that you can't agree in principle to the deplatforming and the censorship because we're ultimately the main targets over time. Because think about it. When you give powers to the censors, who are the censors? Who are the people who are going to determine what is and isn't allowed? I got news for you. It's nobody who has your politics. It's Silicon Valley oligarch billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg who get to determine what polite society is allowed to see. And I don't think he's a reasonable dude. Do you think he's a reasonable dude? I don't agree with his politics. Do you agree with his politics? But more importantly, what happens is it's the corporate media outlets, the traditional media outlets, that end up winning the day because they're the ones who are viewed as the authoritative sources. So anything that's even vaguely, remotely political in nature that's edgy or an outsider opinion or an independent take, that's going to get pushed to the bottom. And those are the people who are going to suffer the consequences. If you're on the left, the whole point of being on the left is to question power and authority and say, hey, we could do this a different way. The way we're doing it now isn't working. But you just gave the ability to the people with all the power and all the authority to determine what's allowed to be shown. And so, of course, they're only going to pick the safest of the safe opinions that are right in line with whatever the establishment wants. And the fact of the matter is, it's a ruse because the establishment is always wrong about stuff, but there are going to be no consequences for that. None whatsoever. Are there going to be any consequences for the people who got Russiagate wrong from beginning to end and pushed an totally zero evidence conspiracy theory? No consequences for them. Are there going to be consequences for any of the people who push lies that end up getting us into wars? No, because you're lying on behalf of the establishment, so that's viewed as authoritative even if it's proven verifiably incorrect. So this is what you're agreeing to if you agree that we have a ministry of truth and censorship and deplatforming. Now, listen, is this me saying that, you're allowed to do direct threats of violence and dox people and things of that nature? Of course not. But listen, even with our First Amendment in this country and the Constitution, that doesn't mean you can do direct threats of violence. In fact, that's one of the few things that violates the First Amendment and freedom of speech. So should there be some sort of an open, transparent process wherein we can determine who is indeed doing direct threats of violence and there should be consequences for them? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you talk about something that directly violates any of the few rules against free speech, what should happen? I've told you, there's arguments that maybe some of Alex Jones' stuff when it came to the Sandy Hook massacre and his people started targeting the parents or whatever. First of all, go after the people who actually did the crime and targeted the parents. Second of all, if there's a video where he doxes one of those people or something, I'm not sure there is, by the way, but if there is one of those things, pull that specific video down after an open and transparent process where you prove, hey, this really does violate, even our very lenient approach to free speech. This is doxing, this is not allowed. Or this is a direct threat of violence, this is not allowed. This is what you do. This is the kind of process that you have. But ultimately, the way that these things should function is they should be public utilities. Every big social media platform should be a public utility. So you have the expansion of First Amendment protections and free speech is there. And right now, that's not the case. And you hear, unfortunately, a lot of people on the left now make the argument they're a private company, they can do whatever they want. If they want to ban whoever they want for whatever reason or non-reason, it's fine. Okay, well, now you're arguing like a right-wing libertarian if you make that argument. Private companies can do what they want. Really? You don't say that when it comes to, pollution and child labor and various other externalities. You don't say that. So why do you say it now? Well, just because sometimes they happen to like the target of the deplatforming and the censorship. Well, now you can see, and this is even, I'm sure Natalie would even admit, this is kind of a light example, but it's real. Like, this stuff is real. And who's to say now that when she uploads another video, because all her stuff, just like our stuff, is kind of edgy. So when she uploads another video, how does she know it's not immediately going to go into age-restricted mode? And I guarantee you this, she's definitely not on the normal algorithm that CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of them are on, just like me. I'm not on that algorithm either. And so I guarantee you her stuff if they allowed it to be recommended to new people at a normal clip, I guarantee you she'd be double as popular as she already is. She's phenomenally popular, don't get it twisted. But I'm just saying, I'm sure she's hit a roadblock just like this show has and many other independent media outlets have. And it's simply not fair, it's not just, and it's wrong in principle. So, she's right. Free speech originally was a left-wing issue because lefties understood we're the ones questioning power. So the power is going to try to censor us and deplatform us and get rid of us. So that's why we embrace this as a matter of principle, where even if somebody I massively disagree with says something, you got to protect their rights because it is a right. And a right by definition is not something that's you could just willy-nilly take away. You know, if we're allowing permits, you allow this overclass, this ministry of truth, to give you a permit to say this or that. Permit derives from the word permission, which is the opposite of a right. So we shouldn't treat this stuff like that. It's too important. It's too important. And this is the new public square. And so I think she hits the nail on the head here. Free speech really is an essential leftist issue. And I'll just say this. If you don't see it now, how important it is, you will in due time. Because I'm telling you, at some point, they run out of like the token, extreme right-wingers to ban, where the lefties nominally like it and accept it and think it's great. At some point, you run out of those. And then it's just all lefties or people questioning authority, people with alternative views, people with interesting views. That's what's going to happen. Those are the people who are on the chopping block. And if you don't see it at this late date, I want to be kind to you, but I'm a little floored that you can't see it. But if you don't see it, again, I think you will see it because this isn't going to stop. This sort of creeping authoritarianism is not going to stop, and it's not going to end nicely.